What is up, guys, and welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be giving you guys my part 2 of my Flash rewrite. Now guys, this part 2 is going to be just rewriting season 4 and 5. Tomorrow's video will most likely be part 3 of this, which I will be rewriting season 6 and 7, so make sure you guys are on the lookout for that. But anyways, let's start with season 4. Now guys, when I'm actually looking at season 4, I realize that it's actually a lot better of a season than I initially thought. However, there are still a lot more things to talk about for this season than there were for like season 3, for instance. The first thing I want to talk about is the storyline of Barry coming out of the Speed Force. I think that actually worked pretty well. I really like how they did that. But another thing about season 4 is Iris. Iris, I really don't like her storyline. I don't like that she stopped doing, her reporter stuff like from the comics, and they made her Team Flash leader. I really wasn't a fan of that in season 4. The villains for the first 3 episodes, they're not exactly good, but I still think they found a way to make it entertaining. And then season 4, Ralph Dibny being introduced to the show. He's a great character. I really like how they introduced him in episode 4. That was pretty good. But then we got to talk about episode 5. One of the worst episodes I've ever seen in Flash history. Honestly, I'd rather have this just be a 22 episode season instead of a 23 episode season and just kick that episode out of the show. That episode was absolutely terrible. But yeah, in these first 7 episodes, the Thinker seemed like such a good villain, such a threatening villain. I actually really liked the dynamic, the rivalry between Barry and the Thinker. I thought that was just great. And then you have the crossover, Crisis on Earth X. That was actually a little bit of an underrated crossover, I'd have to say. Oh, and I almost forgot to mention probably the worst character I've ever seen being Amunet Black. I would much rather have literally anyone appear instead of Amunet Black. I could care less about Amunet Black. I absolutely hate that character. But now, how exactly could these things that I didn't like in the first 9 episodes be changed? What I think should have happened is, obviously, as I said in my last video, Captain Cold should have never stopped being a villain. So I think if we all got what we wanted, Captain Cold should have at least 1 episode in season 4, assuming that he would have stayed a villain. I think he really should have stayed a villain. It's so dumb that they made him an anti-hero, hero type of character. I just really wish he would have been, stayed a villain, just like in the comics. He's such a great villain in the comics. So yeah, I definitely think Captain Cold should have had an episode in this season. That probably could have been like episode 3 or something like that. And then with the bus metas, now I understand the concept of the bus metas, leading up to the Thinker's plan. However, I just don't see why there needs to be an episode for each individual bus meta. I really don't think that makes much sense. Instead of the bus meta villains being the villain for the episode, I think it should be more DC characters, more comic book characters to definitely be the villain for those episodes. So you guys can basically just take your pick at what comic book villains should be the villains for those episodes instead of these bus meta villains that are the weekly villains. So what I think exactly should have happened is these bus metas, I think they could like all appear in maybe like 1 episode or something along the lines of that. I just really think they should have made that bus meta storyline a lot shorter this season. But then I actually think episodes 10 to 14 are pretty good. Barry being in prison, that storyline is really, really good. However, obviously, it's not even close to as good as when Oliver Queen was arrested and put in prison. That storyline was absolutely amazing. One of the best storylines I've ever seen in the Arrowverse. But anyways, now the episodes 10 through 14, I just don't exactly like the villains. I really don't like the villains too much. And the Thinker switching bodies is one of the main problems I have with this season. I absolutely hate the Thinker switching bodies. Yes, I know the Thinker needed to switch bodies in order for his storyline to actually work out in the end. He needed certain powers to do certain things for his master plan, and I get that. But as I said before, the bus meta storyline, it should have been a lot shorter. The Thinker was switching bodies for like 8 episodes or something along the lines of that. I just really think that should have been condensed down into like 2 or 3 episodes where he switches like into multiple bodies in 1 episode, and then the next episode switches into like 3 or 4 new bodies or something like that. And then of course at the end, him quote unquote killing Ralph, switching into Ralph's body. I think that would have been a way better storyline to see. But of course, we can't not mention the Enter Flash Time episode, one of the best episodes of the season, and I really wish they did more speedster stuff in this season. That's another problem I have. It's like they were focusing on, the hero versus the villain instead of like the comic book speedster stuff that we're all used to from like the first 3 seasons. I really think they should have implemented more speedster stuff into this season, but what they had for season 4 still wasn't that bad. So yeah, for all those storylines where the Thinker is switching bodies, what I think there could be instead of that, I think, obviously there's still going to be a few episodes where the Thinker would be switching bodies, and I think, 2 or 3 episodes could definitely focus on that. However, what I think should have happened is, as I just said, the majority of these episodes should have been like speedster related stuff, so maybe like, a new Speed Force storyline or something like that, more returning speedsters. Wally West might return in the middle of the season, more episodes with Jesse Quick, more episodes with Jay Garrick, just something like that. I definitely think would have been really cool to see in the sort of the middle of season 4, just sort of right after Barry escapes, or not escapes, but gets out of prison. I think they definitely should have had more speedster stuff. Then you have like the Run Iris Run episode where Iris gets speed. I think that, I guess that's sort of interesting. However, the villain for that episode was really bad, and the storyline for that episode I just didn't particularly like, but I guess it still works sort of in the season. But then the last thing I want to talk about for this season is the finale. Now, I do like the Thinker in this finale, especially because he's in his original form, his Clifford DeVoe form. And the one thing I really don't like about the finale is how they defeated the Thinker. I think they really should have, tried to go for something like the Flash outsmarts the Thinker. I mean, I think they sort of were trying to do that. However, I just really didn't think it worked with Barry and Ralph, fighting a bunch of different versions of the Thinker. I really wasn't a huge fan of that, but if Barry could use the chair like he did in the actual episode and actually outsmart the Thinker somehow, I think that would have been a lot better to see instead of fighting a bunch of different Thinkers in DeVoe's mind. So yeah, with that out of the way, let's move on to season 5. Alright, so with The Flash season 5, I do have to say the first 7 episodes of this season are not very good. This is probably the worst part of this season, is the first 7 episodes. Episode 1 I actually did really like, and that's because they had 3 speedsters in this episode, which was pretty cool. Wally West, aka Kid Flash, of course, the Flash, and Nora West Allen, aka XS, and they all took down that plane. They phased it through the bridge, just like that one scene in the comic books. I think that was pretty cool to see. So I did think episode 1 was pretty good, but episodes 2 through 7 I think are really bad. Besides, actually Cicada during this time was extremely threatening. That one fight at the end of episode 2 when Team Flash takes on Cicada, I thought Cicada was a great villain at that point. However, besides that, the rest of these episodes just really aren't very good. Nora is pretty annoying. I really don't like their new meta tech storyline they implemented here, but there's a lot of things that I would change. And then episode 7, the Thanksgiving episode, they had the actor that played Weather Wizard return. However, he didn't even use his powers whatsoever. I really think they should have actually had him be the villain of the episode instead of his daughter. I think that would have been way better to see him as the actual villain. The Icicle storyline with Caitlin's father, that's not actually too bad. I actually did enjoy that a little bit, but I really think that they just need to improve the villains that they use and the storylines for those villains. More comic book villains is what I really think they need. More villains that the fans are gonna like. So for these episodes, I really just think they needed to change the villains and the storylines for those villains. But in these first 7 episodes as well, I really like when Nora mentions like the Flash Museum or stuff from the future. I think that was actually done pretty well. But then after those first 7 episodes, we move on to episode 8, which is the 100th episode, and I think this episode is amazing. You have Zoom returning, you see Thawne once again, Savitar, a little bit of the Thinker, all that stuff is pretty good. You have like an homage to the particle accelerator exploding. That was a great scene. I actually don't think there's very much wrong with that episode whatsoever. The crossover Elseworlds, one of the best crossovers in the Arrowverse. But yeah, then after that is when Cicada starts to be a really bad villain. But we still have this, we get this Reverse Flash storyline starting up. They should have definitely brought Matt Letcher back to play the Reverse Flash. It really makes no sense that he's in his Wells form. But one thing I actually really did like, in episode 11, Cicada breaks Nora's back and Barry gets extremely mad about that. I really like the rivalry in that episode specifically between Barry and Cicada. However, this also made Cicada seem like a way less threatening villain. And Cicada was just a terrible villain in these next few episodes. Then you had episode 14 where Nora is reversing time over and over and over again. I actually didn't hate that episode. I just really didn't like the fact that Barry wasn't in it. But then, of course, King Shark vs. Gorilla Grodd. That was a great episode. I really like how the CGI actually looked pretty good in that episode. But then in episode 16, we are introduced to the new Cicada, Grace Gibbons from the future. I think she's way more threatening, however, just not as, still just not a very good villain at all. Orland Dwyer, the original Cicada, is killed. But yeah, then in episode 17, Sherlock Wells. By the way, Sherlock Wells, this season, I thought he was a very, very good character. I really like him investigating Nora, finding out that she's working with Thawne. And then speaking of that, at the end of episode 17, Sherlock Wells reveals to Team Flash that Nora's been working with Thawne. I really like the acting from Grant Gustin in that scene. First of all, was pretty much perfect. I really like the rivalry at that point. You can even see right there how much Barry hates Thawne. I really like how they did that in the season. But then in episode 18, we have the introduction of Godspeed. Now, a lot of people didn't like Godspeed in this episode, and I'll admit, you know, his dialogue was at times just really bad. It just really wasn't very good. But other than that, I thought he was actually pretty good. I really didn't know why people hated him so much. But I also didn't really like the fact that Nora ended up just defeating Godspeed. I mean, I did like that she had the help of Thawne, which I thought that was actually pretty cool. But the rest of it, you know, that episode's not exactly good. And then from that point on, the season isn't very good until the finale, in my opinion. So what I think should have happened in episodes 19 through 21, I think that, you know, basically the events of episode 21 should have happened in episode 19. So yeah, what I think should have happened is at the episode 18 is titled Godspeed, and it's literally an entire flashback episode of, you know, Nora's time. However, I think that should have, you know, probably happened for like half the episode, and then they eventually let Nora free, and then they would actually end up defeating Grace Gibbons in episode 18. So then in episode 19, the Reverse Flash storyline can start up, and that can go for the rest of the season. Then going into season 6, where of course Reverse Flash should have appeared in Crisis on Infinite Earths. But yeah, I would just basically change that. So episode 21 is now episode 19. So Ralph figures out Thawne's plan, that is using Cicada's dagger. Ralph's a great character in this season, by the way. So yeah, episode 20 also was a very bad episode. That episode should just basically be kicked out of the show. So yeah, I think that Grace Gibbons Cicada should have been defeated at the end of episode 18, or maybe even the start of episode 19. Then the Reverse Flash would be basically like a third main villain for the rest of the season. So yeah, comment your guys' thoughts on seasons 4 and 5, what you guys thought of my rewrite. Comment what you guys would personally rewrite these seasons to be like. And yeah, I'll see you guys in the next video.